You've got a great idea for a small business, but you just can't get it off the ground. You want to be your own boss, set your own hours. Well, new year means new opportunities, and Shopify's got you covered to help get your venture off the ground. Shopify makes it easy to manage your growing business. You can get your store up and running easily with thousands of customizable templates. And they help with the details like shipping, taxes, and payments from one single dashboard. Don't kick yourself next holiday season when your 2025 resolution list looks the same as it does today. Make it happen with Shopify. Established in 2025 has a nice ring to it, doesn't it? Sign up for your $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/income, all lowercase. Go to shopify.com/income to start selling with Shopify today. Shopify.com/income.
Heidi-ho, I'm Uno Clay from Philadelphia, and I support GenXGrownUp on Patreon. In a world torn apart by angry pundits and ceaselessly acerbic news, the cheerful tone of GenXGrownUp is always a welcome escape, not to mention endlessly entertaining, and sometimes even informative. If you want to support the show too, click on genxgrownup.com/Patreon and toss them a couple bucks. It's the guaranteed way to gain the respect of your peers and immediate promotions at work. Not guaranteed in all 50 states. Some employers may see fit to demote you, and your peers will probably find you weird and distasteful. Results may vary. You are warned.
No life, no fun. Don't you know that you're a grown-up? GenXGrownUp is a YouTube channel, website, and audio podcast you're listening to right now. All made for and by people who love exploring media, games, tech, and toys of yesterday and today through the eyes of Gen Xers who refuse to grow up. Your dinner cannot just be French fries. Basically, life sucks as a grown-up. Welcome back, Gen X Grown Up podcast listeners, to this, the Backtrack edition of the Gen X Grown Up podcast. I am John. Joining me, as always, of course, is Mo. Hey, man.
Hey, how's it going?
You know it's not a show without George. Hey, George.
Hey, how's it going, guys?
Released in 1980, Berzerk is an iconic arcade game forever etched into video game history. Known for its pioneering use of voice synthesis, intense gameplay, and relentless enemy robots, it captured the hearts and quarters of countless gamers. So in this Backtrack, we take on Evil Otto and his maze of robots as we celebrate over 40 years of the classic arcade game Berzerk. And it's kind of funny story. This is the first Backtrack of the new year, and we actually forgot to schedule something for this episode. So we started chatting amongst ourselves going, oh, what can we do easily? Pick an arcade game that we can play. We know about that. Just dig up some things. So this was a surprise to us as well as it is to you. We're going to talk all about Berzerk in this episode. Before we do that, time for some fourth listener email. If anybody writes in, that's not one of the three of us, you are our fourth listener. And the fourth listener this time around is, and I'm not making this up, Schlumpy. Schlumpy wrote us. The subject line.
You must be a Drew Barrymore fan.
I think so, yes. Subject line of Schlumpy's email is game show Backtrack. You guys remember that Backtrack we did all about the TV game shows? That was a great popular one. It tells you Schlumpy's digging in the back catalog, so more power to you. Thank you. Here's what Schlumpy says. Hi, guys. Love the show. Thank you. I recently listened to the game show Backtrack, and I, too, used to love watching them with my grandmother. Every time I pretended to be sick and stayed home from school, it was awesome spending time watching with her. It was funny how she really seemed to care if they lost the game on The Price is Right.
Yeah.
You know, that's something we only just touched on. Yeah, I think we did talk about staying home from school and watching the game shows and stuff, but I hadn't really thought about, there was like an uncle or an aunt or a grandparent or something that you didn't spend time with during the day usually, and now you kind of did in their world, watching the shows they watched. Yeah. There's that getting to know somebody aspect of game show experience that I hadn't considered, but you're right, Schlumpy. That's cool. Schlumpy goes on to say, by the way, in a related topic, a great movie about the future of game shows is The Running Man. Yes, it is. Yeah, it's an awesome one, no doubt. I especially love that the star of the movie was none other than Richard Dawson from Family Feud fame. Yeah. Yep. You know what I learned recently? I always thought it was funny and clever that they had a game show host as the host of the game show in that movie. Right. And I mentioned that to somebody and they're like, it's not that amazing. Richard Dawson was an actor before he was a game show host.
He
And I'm
was.
That's right.
I didn't think of that.
Back in the cowboy days. Yeah.
Yeah, it didn't occur to me.
He was in Hogan's Heroes too.
I just think of him as the game show host, but of course he had a career before that. So he was uniquely qualified because he had both been an actor and a host. So yeah, he's great in the running, man. Yeah, in fact, there's a remake coming, isn't there? Yeah.
I think so. I don't know if you guys heard, but you said Price is Right. Did you hear about like the most embarrassing moment on Price is Right? A woman in a wheelchair won a treadmill.
Oh, wow.
and
so what did they do? They just let her sell it?
Went with it.
Yeah. What are you
she decided to keep it because she says, I need something to hang my clothes on like everybody else. So
like everybody else does with their treadmill. Ouch, that hits too close to home. Let's see. Schlumpy wraps it up saying, keep up the great work, Schlumpy. Thank you.
Nice.
We appreciate you for writing in. Thank you for that. Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah. I remember the game show Backtrack was very popular when we published that. It had to be a couple of years ago now, but we're glad that you found it and enjoyed it. Listen, fourth listener, if you would like your email featured here on the show, it's drop dead easy. All you got to do is hit us up via email at podcast@genxgrownup.com. Read every single one of them. And most of them, just like Schlumpy's, will eventually make the show. All right. That good business in the rearview mirror. We're going to jump into this Backtrack all about Berzerk after this quick break. Stick around.
Flex your business with an American Express Business Gold Card. You'll earn 4 times membership rewards points on your top 2 eligible spending categories, like transit and electronics, each month, on up to $150K in combined purchases per year. Plus, you can now earn 3 times membership rewards points on flights and prepaid hotels booked on AmexTravel.com. Terms and points cap apply. Learn more at americanexpress.com/business-gold. Amex Business Gold, built for business by American Express.
You're listening to Gen X Grown Up. But if you have a friend who's not yet listening, why not? Tell them about us. They'll thank you later.
Are you looking for fun? Then come into Funland, your family entertainment center in downtown Toronto. We're Ontario's largest arcade with over 120 games, video games, pinball, video laser discs, an electronic shooting gallery, the world's largest video game, and a new game every week. Because we're the biggest, we get the newest games first. It's all here at Funland, Yonge Street, north of Dundas, opposite Sam the Record Man. Kids welcome except during school hours.
Sharks are humanoid. Intruder alert, intruder alert. Chicken fight like a robot.
The arcade game Berzerk is, look, if you grew up in arcades, we're not going to tell you a whole lot you don't already know. You're going to reminisce with us. But in the off chance you're listening or you're a younger person or just didn't spend time in arcades, Berzerk is a classic arcade game where you play as a humanoid intruder who has to escape maze-like rooms that are littered with robots that slowly move toward and shoot at you. The player can shoot at the robots and try to escape the room, and along with the robots, a smiley face known as Evil Otto appears to hunt down the player within each room, and he's actually, like, you can't kill him. All you can do is run from him.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's cripplingly scary. Yeah, I had nightmares about Evil Otto.
You know, I did play this game a little bit. I don't think quite as much as either of you, but the one thing that always hit me when I was playing it, and maybe it was because of what I was a fan of at the time, the robots, for whatever reason, I just always assumed that they were Cylons, fighters.
Yes.
You know,
I agree. Yep.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know that surely they hadn't even watched Battlestar Galactica to put them in this thing in block form, but that's what they came across to me as.
Mm-hmm.
And actually, the game was inspired by this old text graphics game called Robot. I don't know if you guys ever played it, but it was like a turn-based one. It made like a grid, like with text, you know how they used to do the grid, and you could move your character in one of the directions, and they had robots that would come after you, and they would just move closer to you every time you moved. Like they would move a step closer. So you had to try to make them crash into each other.
Okay.
And it was a game that was actually in like one of the first couple Byte magazines. It was one of those that you could type in yourself.
Oh, that you could type in.
Yeah.
Oh, nice. Yeah.
But he said that was one of the inspirations for the game.
Yeah. And the he you're referring to, Mo, is Alan McNeil. He worked at Stern, and he based the game, reportedly, off of a nightmare that he had about battling evil robots. Now, while working at Stern, Neil was assigned to fix some technical problems on some of their boards. Now, there's both, they did video games, and of course, Stern, huge for pinball, right? So he worked there. And while he was doing the work, Stern allowed him to develop his own game based on this idea that he had around the original old game you're talking about here. He started to develop it initially with robots, and then later he added the walls. Those weren't even part of it. And then finally the Evil Otto character to expand on the gameplay and give you that sense of urgency to kind of push you to keep going.
You know, you talk about Stern, and this game came out in 1980, 45 years ago this year. But just like you said, Stern is far more known for their pinball machines. Oh, yeah. But I would argue this might be their greatest arcade success. Like, probably even over a lot of their pinball machines back then. Now their pinball machines that they're doing now.
Oh, that's the top. Yeah.
Top-notch games. I mean, you look at like the Guardians of the Galaxy, the Deadpool games, the John Wick game that just came out this past year. Stern is killing it in the pinball world. But back then in the 80s, I think this might have been a bigger success for them than any of their pinballs were back then.
And, you know, the other thing is, it really impressed me. I still, to this day, I look at what these people created with such limited resources.
Right.
I mean, he had 8K total to write this thing in. I mean, that's the thing that just blows me away, that they could even come up with something in that limited space, especially writing in the assembler language. I mean, like, oh my God, it just seems insane to me.
Right. Like this audio file of this podcast you're listening to, you could fit like 1,000 Berzerks into. It's ridiculous. Yep. Now, another facet that Berzerk is well known for, and we'll talk more about it a little bit later, and that's the speech synthesis. I mean, I think anybody you say Berzerk and they go, intruder alert, chicken, fight like a robot, all that stuff. Now, what happened was Stern Company was visited by a salesman who was promoting their speech chip. And when McNeil took a look at it, he's like, oh, I got to put this in my game. I'm going to use these voices not only to taunt the player during a game, but to attract a player like a sideshow barker. Coin detected in pocket, right? It would talk to you when it wasn't being played. And I think without the speech synthesis, this would have been a fine game.
Sure.
With it, it became holy shit game.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's very much like some of the, I keep going back to pinballs. Some of the pinballs that came out around that time started using speech synthesis as well to attract players over to the game. And I think it's because they needed a way to stand out in the arcade. When you're walking through an arcade in the early 1980s, you're hearing all these crazy sounds.
So many sounds.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Now we can pick out every video game in an arcade soundscape probably. But back then it was still, you know, overwhelming a little bit, and they needed to pierce through all of that to get you to bring your quarter over to that machine. I think Berzerk might have done it better than just about anything else in 1980.
Something's talking. I hear blips and bloops, and then a guy talking. Like, holy crap.
Yeah. You know, unfortunately, McNeil passed away in 2017. You know, still very, very young.
Just a little while ago.
But, you know, but again, I think he definitely left a legacy with this game.
He left a mark. Yeah. Yeah. Well, he did. We'll talk later. He did this one, and he did the sequel Frenzy, which we'll talk about a little bit later. Yeah. So he has two classics under his belt. Now, Stern premiered Berzerk at the AMOA, which is the Amusement and Music Operators Association, like a big trade show, you know, an expo in Chicago, late in 1980, the year it came out. On its public release, the arcade game shipped over 50,000 units. Now, I don't work in the gaming industry, but according to this guy, Craig Grinnell of Retro Gamer, he said that was a massive achievement in terms of, I would suppose, for a new game especially, it has no reputation beyond, I just saw it for the first time and sold 50 grand.
Yeah. Wow. You know, the title of the game, this is my book nerdism coming in here, was a reference to was from a book by Fred Saberhagen, which I read. Actually, it's called Berzerk. It's a whole series of, it had to be like 14 books that he wrote based on this world, where it was all based on this race called the Builders. Some precursor race built these autonomous machines to attack their enemy, but they didn't have a way of stopping them.
Started attacking them.
So the machines killed them too, and they self-replicate as well. So that was the basis behind it. And they're still following their prime directive, which was destroy all life. So they're spreading out through the galaxy. And his book was about different people meeting up with these berserkers.
They are Cylons, George. They really are.
Right?
Yeah.
I was going to say, so you mean the game wasn't based on the fictional heavy metal hit from the Clerks movie Berzerker? I thought for sure it was
maybe
retroactively jumped back from Clerks.
Time travel inspiration. Why not?
A couple other facts I found out looking into this was that when he first did the game, you died like super fast. Like it was one of these games that you died in the first minute. And the people who bought the game liked that. Like they wanted that feature because
More
more
quarters.
quarters.
Yeah.
But he
Right.
thought it was cheap. And he actually had a formula in his head that he said that for like, he talked about a length of a movie. So how long should a quarter last if you're dividing that out for a length of a movie at the time?
Oh, okay.
And he said it came to
Interesting.
about 3 to 5 minutes is what he said, because movies back then were like $3, $4, something like that.
Right.
So he wanted his game to at least last 2 or 3 minutes because he wouldn't feel like people got their money's worth
Sure.
when they played.
That's weird. I have always heard, I never knew where it came from. I have always heard the theory that arcade games want to give you 3 to 5 minutes of gameplay and then kill you to get another quarter. But I never heard the equation compared to like a movie. I guess, hey, it's entertainment.
Yeah.
$3, divide it out. Yeah. Make your money, whatever it takes.
And apparently I saw an interview that he gave that there are a finite number of rooms, 65,536 of them. Exactly. If you want to know the number. And they're on a 256 by 256 grid that wraps around. Now, who could ever get to an edge? I have no idea like how you ever get there, but it did keep track of which rooms you went into. So you went back, it would be the same room you left.
Wow.
Really?
Because he said he wanted to make sure that you had that feeling that you were traveling through something.
I think I just always assumed that, look, here's an entrance, here's an exit, here's some robots. Tell the computer to draw some random walls and make sure they don't cut me off, and otherwise it was good. I had no idea that he actually built, especially in 8K. Why would you, maybe the math and calculations to randomize it was more than just making a bunch of rooms. Maybe, I don't know, maybe they're algorithmically created. I had no idea. Learn something. Even I learned something new.
One thing I'm kind of interested in, and I don't know why this wasn't an automatic selection, but we have recently been falling in love with the TV series Secret Level.
Oh, yeah.
It's kind of modeled after the Love, Death, and Robots thing,
Yep.
but it's all about video games that we all love. Why is Berzerk not a game featured in the original first season of this TV series? Is beyond me. This seems ripe.
Yeah, it'd be perfect.
For an animated TV series episode treatment.
And Secret Level has been doing interesting things with the licenses that it has. It's not just saying, here's an animated version of the game you played. It's taking some risks. And so they could definitely take this world that Berzerk is one of the simplest looking and structural games, and the rules are so simple. Guy versus robots, bouncing smiley faces after you, and you could wrap anything else around that and make an interesting story. Now you have an antagonist and a protagonist and some henchmen. Go nuts. You can do whatever you want with those.
Yeah. Jeez. You're right. That's
Come
a
on,
no-brainer.
season 2. Let's get it.
The last thing you want to hear when you need your auto insurance most is a robot with countless irrelevant menu options. Which is why with USAA Auto Insurance, you'll get great service that is easy and reliable, all at the touch of a button. Get a quote today. Restrictions apply.
Be sure to subscribe to or follow GenXGrownUp wherever you listen. And while you're there, rate and review the show too. It helps more than you know.
You want to play Berzerk? You're on. Hey, where are you going? The video arcade. You can't play Berzerk at home. Now you can. Atari.
It's Berzerk inside an electric maze where robots shoot with electric rays.
Take that, turkey.
So look out, don't get trapped or you might get zapped. Berzerk is here from Atari.
Can you beat that?
And only for systems from Atari.
Have you played Atari today?
The thing about Berzerk is that it really did a lot of like new things that weren't seen, especially in 1980. And one of the ones you mentioned earlier was that it had speech synthesis.
Yeah.
I mean, that was just groundbreaking.
Yeah, it was. And it wasn't the first game. There was another game. I think it was a Stern game too, called Stratovox. Came out the same year, a little bit earlier in the year.
I remember that one.
They are credited with being the ones that brought speech synthesis to arcade games.
Okay.
And like you said, George, you walk in the arcade and it's just like you hear that robotic talking, rah, 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 and you know intuitively what game is over there. You know what's coming. Especially, they used to have like 3 or 4 machines of the same kind around a pillar on the wall.
Yeah.
You get a few of those and it's just
It's
noise over there.
conversation.
And it's cool. It's awesome. And aside from the bullets and the speech and the explosions when you shoot a robot, there's no sound. There's no music. There's no like
that's true.
Thump, thump of Space Invaders or whatever. It's just that speech that drives it. Which is why I think when you have ports that don't have it, you go, I don't know.
Yeah.
Now, something I didn't know is that Berzerk has an option to change the language.
Oh,
I mean, that makes sense if you're
Of
going to
course
sell
it
it in
does,
other countries.
But I never thought of it, right? Oddly, no. You would think, well, what are the company? Maybe in Japan where it's hugely popular, maybe that's localization. No, here are the options. English, French, Spanish, and German. Those are the 4 languages you can set it to.
That totally makes sense to me. I wouldn't see this as Japan because Stern's not a Japanese company. Stern's an American company out of Chicago.
They are, right, but I think they would ship them over there. That's why I would think. But I guess that's a good point. They're not a Japanese company.
Back then, I don't think many games went from us to Japan. And certainly not a lot came from Japan. Didn't have the arcade gaming stuff as much as we did, I think. Yeah. Atari was an American-based at that point. This is 1980, not 82, 83.
Okay, that's a good. I hadn't thought of that. Hadn't thought of that. This is so early. This is the earliest game we've talked about in a dedicated backtrack. Yeah. The other thing that's really cool is that the digitized speech, I can't imagine how this is true, was so expensive at the time of the development in 1980. Because of the difficulty of compressing speech in computers, it's estimated that each word you hear spoken cost about $1,000 to get into the game. $1,000.
Jeez.
For a word. Chicken, there's $1,000. Robot, there's $2,000. Holy crap.
That's maybe why he wasn't so verbose, right?
Yeah, that's why he didn't say so much.
Well, actually, they told him that he had a budget of X number of words.
Did he?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And so, when he had to, later on, when you get to one of the sentences, he says, he had to take a word out of another one to add a word to this one because he only had so much to work with.
So if you work in emulation, you can get not just the phrases, but the individual words, like coin, destroy, alert, all of those. But they use those, what I think is about 20 words and phonemes to make a number of memorable things. We talked about coin detected in pocket.
Yeah, that's great.
When they would kill you, got the humanoid, got the intruder, intruder alert when you come in, destroy the intruder, humanoid must not escape.
Yeah.
And also my favorite one, when you run out of a room, chicken, fight like a robot.
And apparently he put that one specifically because one of his guys that worked with him and played the game would just run out of rooms and not kill the robots. So he took words from other ones so he could do that one. And some people actually thought it detected coins in your pocket. They're like, how does it know I have a quarter?
I could still believe in that when I was a kid. I was 9 years old in 1980. I'd have been like, holy shit, that game knows I got quarters.
Look, if it can talk, what can't it do, right?
Right. The design of the main bad guy, Evil Otto, it's based on the smiley face, obviously, that was, coming around from the 1960s. Alan McNeil, he hated that image so much because he thought it was fake friendliness bullshit and everything. So he said, you know what? This is just like the shitty businessmen or salesmen that come around and charge me $1,000 for a goddamn word to put in this game. So I'm going to make my bad guy the smiley just to, give a finger to the bumper sticker industry of America.
Oh, that's nice.
That's great. And apparently Otto was a real person. There was one of the managers or something who was a super strict person, and that's where they kind of get the name Otto for. I read that
somewhere. It wasn't at Stern. It was his previous job. It was a manager. So, this guy.
So another up yours with somebody else.
Yeah, sticking to the man, sticking to yet a specific man, sticking to that man, and all the fake smarmy business.
Wasn't Mario designed after somebody's manager or something too? So it's not unheard of.
That
people do this.
Was Mario like a building manager or something? Yeah, I remember we talked about that. Yeah, you're right. Now, if anybody talks about Berzerk, we can't not talk about this here because people will go, why didn't you talk about the guy who died? Yeah. So it's not quite an urban myth. It's somewhat true, but like so many urban myths, it's not all the facts are known. But there are histories, there are documented facts. 2 people suffered a heart attack and died moments after playing Berzerk. Now, one of them was Jeff Daly in 1981. He set a high score and then moments later dropped dead at the age of 19.
Ooh.
Now, that one, right, terrible. Now, I recall the game didn't kill him.
No.
He later,
autopsy.
after the fact, autopsy and whatever, he had a heart defect that was undiagnosed. They didn't know about. It could be the excitement of getting the high score, or the game could have led to it. But what I'd read is that anything could have triggered this. It was just happened to be he was playing a game when it happened. And then a year later, I wasn't aware there were 2. In October of 82, 18-year-old Peter Burkowski entered Friar Tuck's game room in Calumet City, Illinois, set 2 high scores, and a few seconds later, he dropped dead. Now, both players were very healthy and had no history of heart problems or anything else. But I know the first one was later diagnosed. I dug up, I couldn't find information on the second one. But yeah. They used that as Stern didn't advertise people died playing our games, but also you could be sure Stern wasn't saying don't talk about it because publicity is publicity. It's sensational information. So it's like, okay, why not?
So I found something. The only thing I found on the second one was that it was in the Weekly World News. So I don't know how reputable.
Right.
Because that's next to, Monkey Boy Found in Space. I mean, it's the same level of articles.
Yep.
But I'll tell you one thing, though. I mean, I heard that when I was a kid, and that gave the game more.
Right. I want to play it. What killed this guy? Right.
What's up with this game?
One more item to share with you that I am sharing with you because I have pretty high confidence that neither of you know this song. You're aware of Pac-Man Fever.
Yes.
Sure.
You know it's a great song by Buckner and Garcia. I don't know if either of you listen to the album regularly, but there are other video games covered, including Berzerk. It has its own song. Now, normally when we do a musical backtrack, we listen to the music in the breaks and then we react to it here. But I'm going to do something different here. I want you to imagine what you think a Berzerk song would sound like. And I'm going to play it for you right now to see what you think. You ready?
Okay. Yeah.
Here it goes.
What the hell?
Intruder alert. Fight like a robot.
Bubblegum music.
I was going to say, it feels like Elton John decided to write this song.
Well,
We're going to get to the chorus. Here we go.
Oh, it's a chorus?
I can move in any direction. Once I start, I'm never done. I can go from room to room. I can crawl or I can run. I can wander through the maze. It's a wonderland at night. I can stop and aim my gun when there's a robot in my sight. I can wander through the
Almost there.
Okay.
It's a wonderland at night. I can stop and aim my gun when there's a robot in my sight. I think I'm going berserk.
Oh, my God.
I think I'm losing my mind.
Oh, my God.
Yeah, there's a minute and a half I won't get back.
Yeah, ever.
So what do you think of Going Berserk? Does it fit thematically with what you expected?
I don't think that fits with anything.
Yeah.
Ever.
I'm with George on this one. Yeah.
Well, because I had the album, I had the LP as a kid, this was in heavy rotation in my bedroom. I heard Going Berserk a lot. I know the words, but
That's what she said.
You got me. I'm speechless. You're well done. Okay. Well, since I have nothing to say, when we get back from the break, I'll recover. We'll talk a little bit more about the evolution of Berzerk. Stick around.
In a world infatuated with comic fandom comes a show to help us remember the talents that have inspired us.
Whoa, cut.
Oh, come on. It wasn't that bad.
It's a bit dramatic. Let's just tell them about the show, guys.
We are the Canned Air Podcast.
Join us weekly for a comedic trip through pop culture. We also welcome some cool comic creators, as well as some of the voice and screen actors that helped shape your childhood.
Find us on cannedairpodcast.com and on the Evergreen Podcast Network.
Hello, and welcome to Novel Conversations, a podcast about the world's greatest stories. I'm your host, Frank Lavallo, and for each episode of Novel Conversations, I talk to two readers about one book. And together, we summarize the story for you. We introduce you to the characters, we tell you what happens to them, and we read from the book along the way. So if you love hearing a good story, you're in the right place. Our 9th season is coming this fall. Tune in to hear from some of the all-time great authors, Charles Dickens, Jules Verne, F. Scott Fitzgerald, and more. Subscribe to Novel Conversations wherever you listen to podcasts.
Each episode of Gen X Grown Up has show notes loaded with links where you can learn more about our topics. And there's even more to see and hear over at GenXGrownUp.com.
This token can unlock a fantasy you'll never forget. With this token, you can live a dream and be what you want to be in the game room at Connecticut Golfland. With the drop of this token, you can travel the universe, race the Grand Prix, or play for the New York Yankees. You can live out your fantasies in the game room at Connecticut Golfland. A cup of tokens can provide you with hours of fun and excitement. Live out your fantasies at Connecticut Golfland, Route 83, Vernon.
Berzerk was released in the arcades in 1980, and it was in every arcade that I ever went to from 80 through 85, 89, 92, whatever. As long as there were arcades, Berzerk was in rotation. But it wasn't the end of the Berzerk story. As I mentioned, McNeil also, a couple years later, I think it was 82 82 or 83, wrote a sequel called Frenzy. And you could accidentally think it's the same game if you glanced at it. It's similar, walls, robots, you're shooting, Evil Otto, all that stuff is there. But he added a number of really interesting things that I don't know how familiar you guys are with Frenzy or its differences, but
not much.
First, there are destructible walls. So used to be in Berzerk, every wall you ran into was electrified, would kill you. Not the case in Frenzy. Many walls are not electrified. You can shoot out little holes in the wall and create your own path through the maze. So that's the thing. For walls that you can't destroy, bullets ricochet off of them. So you can like do a pool table, three bank it to get to a robot if you need to, or their bullets will ricochet to get to you. You got to watch out for that. Evil Otto is actually killable. Kind of. Yeah. If you shoot him a whole bunch 4 or 5 times, he'll disappear, but in 3 or 4 seconds, he'll come right back and faster. So really it's just a reprise to give you time to get out. The coolest thing, though, is the room effect. So every 3 or 4 rooms, there's something in the room, like an electrical machine or a picture of Evil Otto, and shooting through the wall and shooting that changes the game. Like one of them is like a power plant, and if you shoot it, it'll disable the robots for a few seconds. Or another one is like a logic computer. You shoot it, and the robots will behave erratically for a few seconds. So you can actually impact how the game behaves based on these special rooms. And so I used to always just think, it's just, a refreshed Berzerk, but they added a lot to it. So if you like the original and you haven't looked at Frenzy, there's a lot there.
Interesting.
And when they released it, as we were talking about, you need 2 or 3 minutes and then make some more money. As arcade owners, I know, George, you worked in arcades, if it's not making money, you got to do something to make that machine make money, up the difficulty or fewer lives or whatever, or mod kits. Now you could buy Frenzy brand new, or they released a mod kit. If you had Berzerk, you changed out one chip, the marquee, and I think the CPU, and you converted a Berzerk to a Frenzy, and it's a brand new game just like that.
Nice.
Yeah, that's a very popular way of getting new games into an arcade, especially when I worked in them. If you had, like we talked about earlier, John, you were talking about several of them ringing a column or on a back wall or something like that. Taking 1 or 2 of them and swapping out a chip and a marquee and maybe a play field or something like that was a hell of a lot cheaper, not only for you, the arcade owner, but also for the company to ship out to you, because it's a hell of a lot cheaper to ship a couple of chips or a board than it is an entire fucking cabinet.
Right. It's a FedEx package instead of a pallet, right? It's a whole different ball game.
And the nice thing was, in the arcade, you could then get a lot of new, fresh excitement in your arcade where people would gravitate not only toward the Frenzy game that you just installed a couple on the Berzerk machines, but then would play Berzerk right next to it while they were waiting for their turn on Frenzy. So it would increase the profitability on both games. And one thing that arcades pretty early on were trying to find ways to do, were trying to minimize the overhead, the costs of running the arcade. And the largest cost of running the arcade was not the payroll. Believe it or not, it wasn't terribly the electricity. It was the initial price of these cabinets. So they were not cheap even by $1980. And to be able to take an existing machine and reskin it, put something else in it, and put it on. That's what a lot of they did it with games they weren't supposed to. So in this case, it made even more sense.
Of course.
But yeah, I mean, this game was so popular, though. I mean, they ported it to like everything back then, like for home play, which is one of the few games that actually did a pretty good job.
Well, hell, it only took up 8K.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. I mean, the 2600 version, I remember playing that one. I felt like it was probably one of the closest to arcade games that I think I played on 2600.
It didn't have the speech, which is one problem. But it's going to do that because Berzerk is like 4K on 2600, but the gameplay was ridiculously good. Yeah.
Yep. The Atari 5200, which that one was because the controller itself sucked. So that's kind of made the the game itself. And then the Vectrex that we talked about.
Oh yeah.
And the thing, I have a little tidbit information I found out was that the 2600 gave us the first backstory for the game, because
like in the manual
in the book it had like why this person was doing this, like who are you, why are you going through the maze, which apparently it's Astrodate. I don't know what Astrodate means, but that's what it says.
Stardate
3200, and you're the last survivor of a group that came to explore the planet called Mazion. Again, of course, who knows?
It's all on the nose.
It was all made out of corn, apparently.
It was controlled by evil robots who killed everybody except for you, and you're trying to escape the prison that they put you in.
Corn prison. Got it. Yeah.
Corn prison.
Or maze prison, maybe?
Sure.
Mo, you bring up these ports, and it brings up a question that I've kind of had in my mind since you guys talked about wanting to do this podcast. Mm-hmm. Do you think Berzerk was bigger, more popular in the arcades or at home? Because this is the time when the arcade starts to come home, 1980, 82, 84, whenever it came out for the different systems. I remember having a 2600. Berzerk was one of the first cartridges I got, early on. I still have several copies of Berzerk in my, current 2600 library of cartridges here today even. It's a very prolific cartridge. It's not one of those that's super rare that costs a lot of money on the retro market at all. Probably $1 or $2 at the most because it was so prolific. Do you guys think it was bigger at home than it was in the arcade, even though it didn't have the speech synthesis like John pointed out?
That's a tough call. That's hard to say.
Yeah, because it was super popular at home. I mean, everybody played that game at home.
But I don't want to take anything away from its arcade popularity. I mean, it's like it's a cop-out to go, they were equally popular. I don't think that's true. But it's almost like they were two beasts.
Sure.
Like the Berzerk that I played in the arcade was more punishing, and it cost me quarters. And I played it differently and more seriously than when I played Berzerk at home when I owned the cartridge, and I could put the difficulty way low with one of the game options. Robots don't shoot at me, and I could run around and explore. And it was almost when I played it at home, I was imagining I was in the arcade because it looked so good, even though without the speech. So they fed each other, which I know is a cop-out to answer your question, which one? Well, some of each, but for me, it really, I like them both for different reasons, I guess. What about you, Mo?
I think the arcade, I think the arcade game itself was super popular. I mean, it was one of the most popular games for a short time there until, some other games came in play. But again, like I can't remember going to anybody's house who didn't have this game. Like everybody had Berzerk. I mean, it was just like a staple because it was such a good port. And I guess it was like we played it a lot also because it was the game that we felt like we were in the arcade, right? We were playing Berzerk at home, but we kind of felt like your arcade experience. So I don't know. I would probably say at home would be my guess. I probably paid a lot more because there's no quarters.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, if you look at it on a unit sold, there's no question at home sold more units than arcade.
Okay.
Of course, arcade units cost a shit ton more.
Right.
They did do 50,000 of them, which is no small number, which you talked about earlier. I'm sure they did several million because of how many times I go to Goodwill and see a fucking Berzerk cartridge for the 2600 over in the dollar bin or something like that. Popularity doesn't necessarily mean sales or money or quantity, though. I think to Mo's point, the at-home might have been slightly more popular because it was more accessible for more people. Not everybody had an arcade in their town. John,
point.
You lived out in the fucking woods. You had an arcade you had to drive to. If you didn't have that arcade around, but somebody mentioned to you and you saw Berzerk one time somewhere, you'd have probably petitioned your parents for the cartridge and played that more than you did in the arcade.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'll tell you what else you just made me think of is I think my answer changes over time. Right. So starting cheating 1980, there's only the arcade version. It's the most popular, right?
Yes, obviously.
But as soon as there are two of them, arcade's the most popular, we have a port. But the interesting thing that I'm just realizing is that in the arcade, as newer games and more sophisticated games came out, Berzerk started showing its age in the arcade, looking a little simpler, looking a little older. But in the Atari 2600, Berzerk was bleeding edge for what you could get on your home console. So I think the later in the life of the game you go, the more popular or enthusiastic players would be about the home version because that's not a big deal in the arcade anymore, but it's awesome on your home console now,
Other than speech synthesis, I can't think of a single game ported from the arcade to the 2600 that was more like its arcade counterpart.
Oh, absolutely.
It's so
Without
accurate.
doubt.
Yeah. The scale is off.
It's almost like the arcade game was designed as a home game, but then they threw an extra chip in it to make it into an arcade game.
Yeah. No, I can see that. Yeah. It's so faithful. I've said before in videos, man, this might be the most graphically accurate game that has ever been ported to the 2600. And
it was simple.
It deserves its fame. Yeah. And simple. Yeah. I think that's why it's so popular. It's so easily approachable. It's like a Tetris. What do you do? Run, shoot. What else? No, that's all.
Don't hit walls.
It's simple.
Are you tired of seeing your teen or young adult struggle on a path that clearly isn't the right fit? Is your teenager confused about which direction to take after high school? The future of work is changing rapidly, and our kids need to know all of the options available after high school so they're empowered to make the choice that is best for them. In each episode, We explore the latest trends that are shaping the opportunities of today and tomorrow. I'm your host, Betsy Jewell, and this is the High School Hamster Wheel Podcast.
Pit Pass Moto, sponsored by Moto America, is the show that keeps you up to speed on the latest in motorcycling and brings the biggest names in motorcycle racing right to you. From candid interviews with the top names in racing to providing insights into the trends and trendsetters driving the motorcycle industry, we have you covered. New episodes are available every Thursday at pitpassmoto.com and on your favorite podcast app. Ride on!
If you're a die-hard Gen X grown-up, you can pledge your support by clicking join on YouTube or by becoming a patron at GenXGrownUp.com/Patreon.
Galaxy to Earth. Galaxy to Earth. Star Raiders and Berzerk have landed. Protect yourself at all costs. If the Star Raiders don't get you, the Berzerk robots will.
Atari video game owners win again with 2 new home video games, Star Raiders and Berzerk, joining Pac-Man, Yar's Revenge, Haunted House, Defender, and save up to $10 on 17 other hits made only for systems from Atari.
Galaxy to Earth. Contact this Atari base station for help.
Well, as is so often the case with so many early arcade games, marketing became a big thing. Now, not as big as a Pac-Man or a Donkey Kong, but Berzerk was popular enough. Look, it sold 50,000 units and started going into homes, like we were just saying. You could get some marketing. There were some toys that you can get and stuff. Mm-hmm. And one that I got 10 years ago or so, Milton Bradley did a Berzerk board game. Now, I'm a sucker for board games based on these arcade games because it's nothing like the arcade game. It's just the imagery, you know?
Right. Yeah.
The best part of this little board game is you have the little robots that do stand up in the maze, and your little guy that shoots, he has like his arm on a little swivel, like he has to raise up his guns to shoot. So they did more and more to try to make it more like the guy in the game who had to lift his arm and shoot. It's a regular maze game like any other board game, but it's fun. I mean, it's for what it is.
If you want to see something funny, go to YouTube and search for the TV commercial for the board game. It's
really?
And it's like a young kid asking his grandma if she wants to play Berzerk. And she's like, yeah. And she's running to her car. And he's like, no, grandma, we can play at home. I mean, it was so funny.
Well, continuing the legacy. So that was back in the 80s. I think that board game came out like in 82, 83. Mm-hmm. Stern, you mentioned this earlier, in recent decades has focused on their pinball game.
Sure.
Yeah.
And I say they're not their pinball game one machine, but their expertise in pinball has been ramping up. And their arcade library was just sitting on a back catalog on somebody's back shelf, and nobody could do anything with it until Atari in 2023, who had been on a rampage of buying up other franchises and other stuff. News dropped in March that they acquired 12 Stern arcade games, including Berzerk and Frenzy. And there's a few more, Tasmania, Lost Tune. We did some videos about it back then. And as soon as they bought it, they started capitalizing on Berzerk.
Yeah.
Actually, the day after they announced it, the Atari 2600 version that you could not get anywhere was in the Atari VCS store to buy the next day for $5.
Right.
So right away, they had that up there. And then later in the year, in 2023, they had this recharged line we've talked about on the podcast many times. They did a Berzerk recharged. Now, have you guys played or have any thoughts about that one? I do. I have thoughts about it.
I haven't played it.
Yeah,
okay.
I did.
Yeah. They kind of made it a dual stick shooter, which is interesting.
Yeah.
Because you can run in one direction and shoot in the other. That's cool. But it kind of lost some of the Berzerkness. It just kind of made it a little more generic. But
it didn't grab me.
Yeah, there's more that can be done. Another current iteration that was available now, finally, now that someone owned the rights, Atari now is out there. Stern had it and wasn't talking about it. Atari owned it. So Replicade, that makes the 1/6 scale arcade cabinets.
Oh, yeah.
They came out with a Berzerk cabinet and a Frenzy cabinet, and both of them had both games. I don't know if you guys remember, there was a brouhaha around the release of those.
Kerfuffle.
So Replicate, in the name, it's replicating these old arcade machines. Right. And now that Atari owned Berzerk, on the marquee, on the artwork, the Stern name was turned into Atari, but in the Stern font.
Oh, so it's not quite authentic then.
And there was this, I'm going to ask you guys where you land on this. The thing is, they own it, so they have the right to rebrand it if they want.
Yes.
But you want it accurate to what you remember in the arcade. Now, Replicate ended up saying, we throw our hands up. They gave you a sticker to change it to whichever one you wanted. But if you're Replicate, where do you fall? What's the right choice now on a Berzerk cabinet that's owned by Atari, but was never had Atari on it back in the day? Let's start with you, George. Where do you come down?
I mean, so you're talking about ownership rights versus, I guess, accuracy for nostalgia, right?
Yeah.
Obviously, being in the nostalgia market as we are, I really want to see the Stern font. When I first saw it, and like I said at the beginning of the podcast, I didn't play this game a crap ton, but I, even as a neophyte Berzerk fan, noticed immediately that says fucking Atari. That's bullshit. Right. That should say Stern. Mm-hmm. And I remember voicing my opinion pretty strongly on a couple of forums and saying, look, I understand you own the rights, and we're good friends with Atari. We work with them all the time. They're great people. This was a misstep, in my opinion. You should have left it as Stern. You could have thrown the as created by Atari on the back or as licensed by Atari on the back with a sticker. Right. And that way you still get your comeuppance. You're going to get your money anyway from the licensing sales. So do you really need to have your name on it just to make yourself feel good that you, because Replicate's the ones doing it. You're just licensing it to them. Right. I think they should have left it as Stern.
What did you think, Mo?
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with George. They should have left it as Stern. Yeah. For the little cachet they get for putting Atari on the front, I think they lost some sales because some people be like, oh, it's not authentic. I'm not going to buy it.
Yeah. I think you nailed it. That's the thing. Leaving it Stern had zero blowback potential.
Right.
Zero. I mean, it doesn't make Atari happy because they own it and they wish it didn't have these other guys' names on it, but zero blowback potential. Replacing it, and I'm not talking on the artwork, in the ROM, it says Atari in the big Stern blocky font. There are plenty of people who buy this and go, they don't know the difference. The problem is the people that buy a Replicade for $250, they probably do know the difference. And those are the people you're marketing. So yeah, I wish it had said Stern. So what are you going to do?
Yeah, what are you going to do? but you know, I mean, the legacy of the game still kind of went on. I mean, John, one of our favorite games, Robotron 2084.
Yeah, your favorite game to beat me at, you mean?
That's right. Great game though. That's one that actually the creator of that, Eugene Jarvis, said he was inspired by Berzerk. He said he played Berzerk and he said, so you kind of see it, right? Robot shooting.
Running around shooting robots, right?
Except now you're saving people.
Yeah, more kinds of enemies and you're saving people. Yeah. I can see that. Also, very similar to Smash TV, another one which was the last episode. We were reading a fourth listener email about Running Man.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
And Smash TV is kind of based on Running Man. It's a game show where they're killing people and you're in the middle of this. Another, I think it was a dual stick shooter even, or maybe it was a shoot, I don't know, move and shoot. But again, in a maze, in an arena, shooting robots, trying to get to the exit. Very similar. It inspired lots of games, I'm sure, being one of the early games of its type.
Well, we're not going to go through a podcast talking about an arcade game without at least hitting on some high score statistics, because that's what video games are, all about, is getting the high score. It's not about learning how to play the game better. I don't give a shit about that. I just want the high score. I want to see GXG right up there next to the big number on the top of that line.
Amen.
According to Twin Galaxies, there's 2 high scores available for Berzerk. Currently, right now, Phil Younger has 401,130 for the original dip switch settings, which plays the game at regular speeds and difficulties.
Okay.
There is another high score that they recognize for fast bullets. So a little bit like the fast shooting Galaga, but this is in Berzerk.
Okay.
There's a gentleman named Ponosaurus.
I love the name.
Who he got 350,340 for that high score. Now
that's not much lower.
No.
Well, it's lower, which surprised me because I was thinking it should be higher, because most people can do a lot better with fast bullets in Galaga than can, but I'm guessing it's fast bullets of the robots.
The robots. That's what I assumed too. Yeah, that's what I figured. Because otherwise you'd have a huge advantage and it'd be double, you'd think. Yeah.
That's what I was wondering when I saw the scores. I'm like,
Yeah. When I was browsing high scores, I came across an older record, not either of these, but someone else who had done the regular bullets version. His score was in the 300,000s or whatever. And it said it took him 4.5 hours to accomplish that.
Jeez.
Wow.
A marathon. And I looked at the date and it said, it happened on the 27th through the 28th. Like he was playing overnight. He was in the arcade cranking on that thing.
It just boggles the mind. I think how many screens that was because you didn't get a lot of points in Berserk. I don't remember.
Usually,
it being like
no, it was slow points.
Yeah.
Now, the further you went, as the robots got faster, killing them was worth more, and you got a bonus for emptying the room. But usually, Evil Otto was coming before I made it halfway through the room, and so I had to haul ass or I would get squished. I can't. Yeah, how you manage 400,000 in that game over several hours? That kind of people were cut from a different cloth. They were able to have that kind of focus and that kind of skill all rolled into one. Yeah. It ain't me. It ain't me.
Not me either.
I get my high score and then turn off the machine. Bye. It's gone.
Did it.
It is. All right, guys, I have had a great time talking with you about Berzerk. Before we get out of this show, I want to take just a second to thank 2 more brand new Patreon supporters. We try to take time every show, and I want to thank Chris and Brad S., who are both brand new.
Awesome.
They both headed over to patreon.com/GenXGrownUp, clicked on a few things, filled it out, set up a regular recurring monthly contribution to help keep us going. For as little as $1 a month, you can do the same. Fourth listener, we would love to have your support and add you to our roster of amazing supporters. Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Brad S. And thank you all of our very generous patrons who support us with a monthly pledge. You mean the world to us. We can't thank you enough. But we're gonna next time we talk. So that's gonna wrap it up for this Backtrack edition of the show. Don't worry, we got more coming your way in just a couple of weeks. We're taking a couple of weeks off, but we'll have rewinds coming your way. Until then, I am John. George, thank you so much for being here.
Yes, sir.
Mo, I appreciate you.
Always fun, man.
Fourth listener, it's you we all appreciate most of all, though. We cannot wait to talk to you again next time. Bye-bye.
See you guys.
Take care, everybody.
No life, no fun. Don't you know that you're a grown-up?
GenXGrownUp is a member of the Evergreen Podcast family. Learn more at evergreenpodcasts.com.
Watching shows till sunrise. Unacceptable for grown-ups. Your dinner cannot just be French fries. Basically, life sucks as a grown-up.
With what happened to Mo? He's frozen.
You still hear me?
Oh, you're still there. Yeah, you're still there. You just I see you putting down your paper.
Zencaster.
Yeah.
I'm having George issues now.
No, I doubt it.
You don't want George
I'm
issues.
back.
Just there you go. 2003, Atari, who was what I missed.
You said 2003.
Oh, I did. Thank you. Until Atari in 2003, they had been already.
2003
I did it again.
Hold
I said it again. Okay, I'm going to say it wrong one more time, and then no, I got it. Okay.
My name is Cindy Burnett, and each week I interview at least 2 traditionally published authors on my podcast, Thoughts from a Page. We talk spoiler-free about their books, so you can listen whether you have read the book or not. And then we delve into things that you most likely won't hear about anywhere else. The importance of the cover design, why they included various aspects of the story, personal details about both the books and the authors' lives, and so much more. You can find the podcast on every major platform and learn more about it on my website, thoughtsfromapage.com. Thanks so much for checking it out.